Aldridge.
Hello everyone, good morning and welcome back to day 2 of CBI's annual conference. I had a great time yesterday, so I've come back for more. For those of you who also had a great time yesterday and come back for more, welcome back. And for those of you who are here for the first time today, it's really, really brilliant to have you. But you did miss out, but you are still very welcome. As a reminder, I am Simon Aldridge, Chief Campaigns Director at the CBI, and again, I am your host for today. Before we kick off, I want to once again start by thanking our strategic partners, Accenture and Hayes. Without their support, none of this would be possible. We didn't do applause. We should do applause. We did it yesterday, but I didn't queue you up for it today, so I apologise. But Accenture and Hayes, here is your round of applause. So what is on the agenda for day 2? No surprises. Once again, we will be talking a lot more about growth. But this time, we're going to talk about it with a focus on people, leadership, cybersecurity, dragons, unicorns, not the kind that you find in Harry Potter, but, you know, still really interesting ones. And like yesterday, our aim is to give you lots of insights, tips, and conversations to take away. So, and hopefully we want to leave you feeling a little bit more inspired. That is the purpose of this, to get together, to feel inspired, and to learn from each other so we can all go out and get that growth that we very much need. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome on stage CBI President Brian McBride. Brian, welcome.
Thank you, Simon, and good morning, everyone. For those of you who were at dinner last night, wasn't Nisha from Mowgli quite awesome? She's the first person, thank you. She's the first person I've met who managed to keep Tony Danka quiet for half an hour. But anyway, welcome to day 2. And as many of you know, this is my first conference as CBI President. And I want to start by echoing Simon and thanking our strategic partners, Accenture and Hayes, as well as our corporate partners, Phoenix Group, Related Argent, Shell, and Visa. Now, we've got a great programme for you today, starting with the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer, and we're delighted to have him with us. I know from talking with Rachel Reeves and others at the Labour Party conference that Keir's leading a party that's serious about business and serious about sustainable growth that this country needs. So we're all looking forward to hearing what he's got to say. But before that, I want to share a few reflections of my own, building on Tony's speech yesterday and what we heard from the Prime Minister. So, I've been president of the CBI for 5 months now, which in recent UK politics feels more like 5 years. And now, working in tech, I'm used to disruptors and disruptions, but this has been a bit wild even for me. But I took the job here because I believe in the CBI agenda and that my experience working with companies, big and small, multinational and local, could help. Throughout my career, I've also seen the difference that business and government can make when they work together for the benefit of all. So in my first few months at the CBI, I've been crisscrossing the country, putting that insight and experience to use, meeting members from Bristol to Glasgow to Scunthorpe. I've been talking to you about your needs and the issues keeping you up at night. Rising costs, labour and skill shortages, political instability. And the Prime Minister and Chancellor deserve credit for focusing the fiscal statement last week on protecting the most vulnerable and delivering stability. Because we must reassure markets and secure stability to lay the groundwork for growth. Whatever's been said in recent weeks, growth is still the best answer to the problems of businesses and households. It's also how we want to adapt to a fast-changing world. Because the truth is, the world won't wait for the UK to get through this. Whether we like it or not, there are big shifts happening now on the global stage, and a future economy is emerging. It's defined by the impacts of climate change and the race to net zero, by geopolitical and demographic change, and perhaps, most of all, by accelerating technological change. And it was good to see the Prime Minister focus his speech yesterday on putting innovation at the heart of the UK economy. We're keen to work with the government on that, particularly his request for ideas about innovation-focused regulation. That agility is so important. Because I can tell you what I've seen in my career in tech again and again, is that when you're faced with change of that pace and scale, it's not enough to hunker down and wait. It's the firms that step up and adapt, that survive and thrive. And that's just as true for the UK. The changes happening around us challenge our economy, but they also create opportunities for us to reach for growth. So what I want to talk about this morning is how I believe the UK can get ahead of the curve and grasp these opportunities. I think it will take three things. One, powering up our startups and scale-ups. Two, building partnerships across the country and across the world to boost UK tech and innovation. And three, increasing participation to get more people and more firms involved in the future economy. So first, powering up our startups and scale-ups for growth. Right now, we're a magnet for tech investment. Globally, we're second only to the US, and our tech startups drew a record $11.3 billion in Q1 of this year alone. That's helped make the UK one of only 3 countries, alongside the US and China, with over 100 billion-pound unicorn companies. Startups and scale-ups are the keystone of the UK tech sector, which is now valued at over £1 trillion. So supercharging their success is one of the clearest ways of powering ahead. And the good news is that there are already investors champing at the bit to do just that. The bar is being raised, however. In the US, they are already creating a new generation, decacorns, businesses that scale to 10 billion in value. But at the CBI, we believe the UK can step up and match that. So we're launching a campaign to shine a light on the importance of scale-ups to the UK economy, to knock down the blockers holding them back, and to find smart solutions to boost their success. And we can use that success to spark more innovation and more growth. And we'll do that through my second point, building partnerships to make our tech sector and our economy greater than the sum of the parts. We already have powerful examples of the kind of partnership we need in our economic clusters across the regions and the nations of the UK, because tech is a national success story built on regional collaboration. Take the Humber industrial cluster. It's one of the biggest decarbonisation opportunities anywhere in the world, where partnership between businesses has already led to about 15 billion of new investment being pledged for vital green projects. I visited there last week and was truly impressed by the energy, the enthusiasm and the drive of local businesses, local authorities and local universities working together. Or take the advanced engineering cluster at Motorsport Valley, arcing from Oxfordshire right over to here in Birmingham, adding over 9 billion to the UK economy every year, and leading in fields from Formula One to lightweight materials and medical devices. It's built on powerful partnerships between businesses and universities. And right across the country, in clusters and beyond, there are huge prizes to be had from fostering more collaboration between businesses, universities and innovation centres, using the great strength of UK R&D, which the government boasted with its welcome announcement yesterday of 484 million of targeted investment in R&D. And I can say today that to leverage the strength of UK research and build more of the partnerships that we need, the CBI is working with businesses including BT, Intel, Airbus and Raytheon to launch a second demonstrator cluster called CyberTech West, based around Cheltenham and GCHQ. And it will draw on the region's technical and creative strength and drive collaboration between business, government and universities to forge a world-beating cybersecurity cluster. So in groupings like this and across the UK, we need to create a culture where firms learn from each other's innovations and where there are partnerships between big firms and small, locally, nationally and also globally. Because in an ever more connected and complex world, to stay ahead of the curve, we must work and partner with the best international innovators. But our clearest and our easiest opportunities are still just across the channel in the EU. There are more big opportunities from our trade deal and from existing frameworks like Horizon Europe. But as Tony mentioned yesterday, we still can't grasp them because of the impasse on the Northern Ireland Protocol. So it's time to put economic stability before politics. It's time for flexibility from both sides so that we can restore confidence to the markets and unblock those untapped prizes in tech research and innovation. And then to make the most of these opportunities, we need to get more people and firms across the UK involved in the future economy. And that's the third and final way we can adapt to thrive. On this, there's no doubt what the biggest blocker is to business. It is the labour and skill shortages. Whenever I've met members around the country, their greatest worry is that they can't get the people and the skills that they need. Just in the 3 months of September, employment dropped by 52,000 from the last quarter. This problem is increasing. And the shortages, by the way, aren't just digital and AI. It's in all areas, from butchers to baggage handlers, from hospitality to healthcare. Now, that's partly driven by recent events, by Brexit and the pandemic, but it's also a structural challenge, because the reality is the UK has an ageing society, and one of the legacies of the pandemic is a sharp rise in inactivity among elder workers, with tens of thousands retiring early and record numbers also reporting chronic ill health. We also have one of the biggest skills mismatches in the G7. CBI analysis shows that 90% of the current UK workforce will need to add to their skills by 2030. So how do we tackle these challenges and unblock business? Well, in the short term, the government can help firms by urgently delivering a new shortage occupations list. It can empower the Migration Advisory Committee to diagnose shortages in lower skilled roles. Then in the medium term, the government can help by transforming the apprenticeship levy into a skills challenge fund, which allows employers to spend their budgets on the skills that they need. That includes digital, where closing the skills gap could drive 150 billion economic boost by 2030. Another medium-term priority is tackling economic inactivity. Government can help here by incentivising employer-led interventions for common health issues like back, joint, muscle injuries and mental health challenges. To support this, last week the CBI launched our new Work Health Index, delivered in partnership with the NHS, Government and Business for Health, and you'll be hearing much more about that today in our panel discussion. But as we discussed yesterday, looking to the long term, the UK has to adapt to the reality that we will not be able to rely on employment growth for economic growth. Firms will need to find other ways to drive productivity, and that's where tech adoption comes in. The evidence is clear that business tech adoption is a big economic booster. For example, tech used by SMEs adds £216 billion to the economy every year. But despite an uptick in the pandemic, just 1 in 5 UK firms now have high digital tech adoption, compared to nearly 2 in 5 in the Netherlands and half of all companies in Denmark. So closing that gap and getting more businesses tech-enabled promises big prizes. We estimate that getting more firms to adopt tried and tested tech, from cloud to CRM, could add 45 billion to the economy by 2030, while artificial intelligence diffusion could add about 38 billion. Now, one of those keys to reaching those prizes is helping businesses understand tech and the big trends coming down the track, from AI to quantum. So the CBI is launching a new B2B project called Demystifying Tech to help you understand how tech is transforming the UK economy. Whether you want to share your expertise or learn how tech trends could help your firm get ahead, I urge you to get involved. And I don't just want to talk about getting businesses participating in the future economy, though, but everyone in every part of the UK. And that's about connectivity, which is one of the basics that we need to get ahead. In the UK, there are still 1.5 million households completely offline. Can you believe that? 1.5 million households offline. Getting the UK from 8th to number 1 in the OECD Connectivity Index could unlock about 70 billion by 2026. So we're pushing the government on the steps that they can take to improve connectivity, including the vital supply-side reforms to spark private investment across the UK, from access rights to procurement. So in summary, 3 areas where business and government must work together to put the UK ahead in a changing world. 1, boosting our startups and scale-ups. 2, building partnerships across our economy and internationally. And 3, getting more of our firms and our people engaged in the future economy. Now, I want to wrap up by saying, We all know that these are difficult times, when fiscal constraints mean that there aren't easy answers. We can't just turn on the taps. But that simply means we've got to be smarter. The pace and scale of change around us creates bigger challenges, but also bigger opportunities for those who are nimble and adaptable enough to reach them. And the CBI is here to show the way to those prizes, to help you to step up to seize them, and help the whole country get ahead and thrive in the future economy. So let's get started. Thank you. Thank you. Now, I'm delighted to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, former Director of Public Prosecution, the MP for Holborn and St Pancras, and leader of the Labour Party of Great Britain. Please welcome Keir Starmer.
Good morning. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, conference. It's a real privilege to be here in Birmingham to address you at such a pivotal moment for our country. And here at the Vox, in the NEC, a place where so many greats of music and theatre have played. Bob Dylan, David Bowie, Justin Bieber, he's coming here soon. And who could forget, in 2019, the all-time favourite of the CBI, Peppa Pig. Yes, she played here too. But look, I'm here today to talk about Labour's plan for Britain, how together we can build a fairer, greener, more dynamic country, a nation where working people succeed, where aspiration is rewarded, a Britain with its confidence, its hope, and its future back. I come with a simple message. Labour is ready. Ready to give Britain the clear economic leadership it needs. Ready to work with you to drive our country forward. Not just a pro-business party, but a party that is proud of being pro-business, that respects the contribution profit makes to our jobs, growth, and our tax base, that gets that working people want success as well as support, understands that backing private enterprise is the only way Britain pays its way in the world. And mark my words, this is a matter of conviction for me, and I've united my party behind it. Anyone who came to our conference this summer, anyone I've met since being leader, more than 100 CEOs in the last 6 months alone, knows this already. This is a different Labour Party, and there's no going back. We're ready for partnership. And let's be frank, because we need to be. Partnership is not a nice to have, it's now an economic imperative. I don't want to waste too much time today talking about the government, but the economic damage they've done to our country is immense. They've put our public finances in a perilous position, wasted the chance to transform our potential in an era of low interest rates, created an economy with weak foundations. This isn't about global shocks. That's just an excuse. Nobody criticizes the government for not anticipating the war in Ukraine or denies the war was the spark for the cost of living crisis. But the war didn't ban onshore wind, the war didn't scrap home insulation, and the war didn't stall British nuclear energy. And when it comes to economic growth, the verdict of the former Chancellor is right. They've created a vicious cycle of stagnation. And that's why every crisis hits Britain harder than our competitors. The only country in the G7 still poorer than it was before the pandemic. Disposable income back to 2013 levels. The worst decade for growth in 2 centuries. That's why we need a new partnership. Economic growth is the oxygen for our ambitions, the lifeblood of a strong society and a dynamic economy. but we have to confront the reality of our position. The lessons of the past 12 years can't be ignored. Just stop for a moment and think what working people have been through. They were told, we're all in it together. Then they paid for a mess made by banks. They cried out for economic change in a referendum, but saw their calls go unanswered. And they united to defeat a deadly virus, only to see the government break the rules that they respected. And now, a winter like no other. The biggest hit to living standards in British history, where millions, the length and breadth of our country, will go without food or heating. Once again, asked to pay the price. Don't get me wrong, I know people in this room are struggling too. Your borrowing rates, through the roof. Energy costs, astronomical. More small businesses going under now than at any time since records begun. And I know that every single one is a personal tragedy, an ambition, a dream, an investment in a better future gone. No mistake, it's tough, and it will be tough for a while. But that's why we need to answer the burning question. What will we do differently? How will we help restore the contract that says, work hard and Britain will give you a fair chance? Because let me tell you, that's not how working people feel about our country right now. Not this winter. So this has to be a turning point. Britain needs a new business model. And that will be hard. Changing a business model is hard. You all know that. Nonetheless, it's time for all of us, government, business, trade unions, to get behind the idea, both basic and radical, that our country can grow in a way that serves working people, that higher productivity can come from unlocking their potential, and that we can work together to put their interests first. This has to be the common goal of our partnership, and it must set a new direction on growth, a new way of governing that at times is challenging our instincts and will challenge our instincts. No more trickle-down experiments. That idea has been tested to destruction. But equally, if the South-East races ahead, redistribution can't be the one-word plan for the rest of Britain. You can grow an economy that way, of course you can. But it's not enough. Working people want growth from the grassroots, jobs that are well paid and secure, communities standing on their own feet, public services strong enough to help them succeed. So I promise you now, my Labour government will care, must care, as much about raising productivity everywhere as we've done in the past about redistribution. We're going to throw everything at growing our collective contribution, our productive capacity in every community. And that takes us inevitably to the supply side of the economy. That's why our first priority on tax has always been to scrap business rates. We will level the playing field for our high streets. And with help from Lord Jim O'Neill, we'll make Britain the best place in the world to start a new business. But we also need to look at the supply side differently. It's not just about tax and enterprise. Take the current state of our labour market. So much of this comes back to our public services. Yes, there are other factors. But you can't tell me that the number of older people falling out of work has got nothing to do with the millions stuck on NHS waiting lists. Or that the growing number of people suffering with mental health isn't a drag on our productivity. No, the state of our public services is an economic crisis just as much as a social crisis. So we will launch the biggest training programme since the creation of the NHS. Increase capacity with more doctors, more nurses, more health visitors. Reform the employment service to get more people back to work. give everyone who needs it access to mental health treatment within 4 weeks, and build a modern childcare system that supports parents, especially women, to flourish. This is what the US Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, calls modern supply-side economics. And that's the philosophy that will drive us to do the hard yards on growth. But we'll also need to be pragmatic on the basic lack of people. We won't ignore the need for workers to come to this country. We can't have a situation, as we did with HGV drivers, where temporary shortages threaten to cripple entire sectors of our economy. That would be anti-growth, and it would be anti-business. But I want to be clear here. With my Labour government, any movement in our points-based migration system, whether via the skilled worker route or the shortage occupations list, will come alongside new conditions for business. We will expect you to bring forward a clear plan to boost skills and more training, for better pay and condition, for investment in new technology. Now, we can talk about how this is done. Dialogue is at the heart of partnership. But negotiation with trade unions will be part of it. I said at the TUC conference, my Labour Party is unashamedly pro-business. And I say here today that trade unions must be a crucial part of our partnership. But our common goal must be to help the British economy off its immigration dependency, to start investing more in training workers who are already here. Migration is part of our national story, always has been, always will be. And the Labour Party will never diminish the contribution it makes to our economy, to public services, to your businesses and our communities. But let me tell you, the days when low pay and cheap labour are part of the British way on growth must end. This isn't about Brexit. All around the world, business is waking up to the fact we live in a new era for labour. And while they're adapting, our low growth model is holding us back. It's why we've set out a new deal for working people that will deliver higher pay, stronger rights and better work. Not just for social justice, but also for the new reality on growth. Let me give you an example. Technology. Britain has fewer industrial robots than almost every comparable country. We're behind Germany, France, Spain, Slovenia, Slovakia, Belgium. It's a long list. And in terms of competition over the long run, one that borders on disaster. Now, I know most businesses get this. I've seen for myself how you invest in your people and their productivity. At Vaillant in Derbyshire, I met the apprentices using their skills in conjunction with the new technologies of heat pumps. That technology will continue to adapt, but those apprentices will be at the forefront of that change, working today, training for the opportunities of the future. But when we look at the economy as a whole, it can seem like we're more comfortable hiring people to work in low-pay, insecure, sometimes exploitative contracts than we are in investing in the new technology that delivers for workers, productivity, and our country. And we can't compete like that. Britain's low-pay model has to go. It doesn't serve working people. It's not compatible with grassroots growth. So let me tell you what is. The three big priorities for my Labour government, the principles our partnership must deliver to drive Britain forward. They are, 1, economic stability, 2, higher skills, 3, green growth. Let me take them one by one, starting with economic stability. Because as you know, stability is the bedrock. Everything else depends on it. If we've learned nothing else these past 12 years, It's that chaos has a cost. That's why every policy under my Labour Party announced will always be fully costed. We're determined to reduce debt as a share of our economy. Sound money in our public finances must come first. And we accept what this means. Accept that we won't be able to do things, good Labour things, as quickly as we would like. The lesson of the last few months is stark. Lose control of the economy, and it's businesses and working people who pick up the bill. And I won't let that happen again. But real economic stability has to be about more than public finances. It has to be about providing the right conditions to plan and invest, to think about long-term strategy, not just short-term fixes, to create confidence through certainty. That's the argument for partnership. It's why we're so committed to a modern industrial strategy. It's not about the size of the state. It's about what the state does, how it supports businesses to innovate and grow, brings in the creative brilliance of our scientists and universities, applies them to creating the industries of the future, and uses whatever tool the job requires. Procurement, R&D investment, patient finance, a strategic plan for infrastructure and supply chains, led by an institution, a new industrial strategy council that sits outside the political cycle. Now, I know this isn't the sort of stuff that sets Westminster pulses racing, not a bit of it. But I can tell you this, in every one of our competitors, it's the bread and butter of responsible economic management. Now, yesterday, I went on the Gov UK website in search of the government's industrial strategy. This is what I found. It says, reading from it, the aim of the industrial strategy was to boost productivity by backing businesses to create good jobs. Was. And scratched across the top is one word, I kid you not, archived. Archived. Doesn't that just tell you everything? The government has archived Britain's growth. That's why situations like British Volt keep happening. Why the CEO of Johnson Matthey says we're falling behind in the race for clean hydrogen. Why electric car manufacturers are leaving Britain in droves. Our aversion to proper long-term industrial strategy is costing us billions already. But even worse, it's costing us the foundations of a more prosperous future. And conference, so will the status quo on skills. Any serious plan for growth must accept the need to transform how our country trains people for work. That's why we're committed to changing the way government supports businesses to get the skills that you need. At this conference last year, I announced that Lord Blunkett would lead our Council of Skills Advisors. And this year, I'm pleased to announce that he's delivered that report and we're going to deliver on skills. The apprenticeship levy is not flexible enough. Now, don't get me wrong. Apprenticeships are a gold standard qualification. Their record in tackling the cultural snobbery associated with vocational learning is second to none. But alongside them, we also need to fund the training that works for you. The need for technology short courses that train coders in weeks, that help younger workers get promoted. The training that supports older workers to flourish, or retrain as something new. And let me tell you from personal experience, there's nothing wrong with changing your career in your mid-50s. But the bottom line is this. You need more control over what training your levy can buy. With Labour, that's exactly what you will get. And we'll devolve the power and money on adult skill budgets as well. Decisions that drive growth in communities should be made by people with skin in the game. I profoundly believe that the people and businesses of Birmingham know what training the economy of Birmingham needs. And the same is true in Wolverhampton and Wrexham, Peterborough and Portsmouth. The next Labour government will spread economic power to the grassroots. And our central industrial mission, clean power by 2030, will help us do it. Climate change is the defining social challenge of our times. There's no question about that. I'm sure it scores highly on the risk register of every company in this room. But if you take only one thing from today, let it be this. I don't see climate change as a risk, I see it as an opportunity. The biggest chance we've had in a generation to make our economy work for working people. That's what our Green Prosperity Plan is all about. A plan to make Britain a green growth superpower. To invest in wind, solar, nuclear, hydrogen, green steel and carbon capture. New opportunities for plumbers, electricians, engineers, software designers, technicians, builders. Insulation for 19 million homes. And Great British Energy, a new national champion that will take advantage of the opportunities in clean British power and turn them into good, secure, well-paid British jobs. You can never say it enough. Clean British power is cheaper than imported fossil fuels. 9 times cheaper. If we have more of it, businesses and working people will get cheaper bills. The country enjoys independence from tyrants like Putin. And we give every community a shot at the green jobs of the future. Clean hydrogen in South Yorkshire, Merseyside and the east of England. Offshore wind in Scotland, Teesside, eastern North Yorkshire. Solar power growing rural communities in the southeast, the southwest, and yes, here in the Midlands. It won't be easy, we know that. On planning, on Ofgem's remit, on getting ahead of demand issues with the grid. We not only see the battles ahead, we'll run towards them. Because nothing reeks of decline more than the idea Britain no longer knows how to build things. I won't accept that. And with real partnership, we'll win. The same is true on finance. Big ambitions require public investment, and we will provide it. But we know that the real game changer is private investment, and that this is the perennial challenge for British productivity. That's why we'll also set up a national sovereign wealth fund and use it to manage risk on the critical investments we need to become a green growth superpower, but also to create spillover opportunities for businesses and supply chains right across the country in manufacturing and services. That is what an industrial strategy and partnership must deliver in a nutshell. A new way of managing our economy, a fresh start for Britain. And it's a divide with the government. Last week, you saw the sum total of their offer on growth. Stagnation dressed up in the clothes of stability. Decline paraded as tough decisions. Tough decisions will be challenging their party on planning, on onshore wind, on industrial strategy. But they don't have it in them. Don't understand that to be a careful steward of the economy in a volatile world, you need to be proactive, need to intervene to secure stability and growth. I'll put it simply. Every business in this room has a strategy for growth. A nation needs one too. Because the headwinds we face, climate change, artificial intelligence, caring for an aging society, mean that a hands-off approach just isn't fit for purpose anymore. And I'm not going to give up on growth that easily. I believe in our country. I believe in our businesses, and I believe in our people. Britain deserves better. A new partnership for prosperity. The path to a greener, fairer, more dynamic country. To higher wages, higher skills, higher productivity. To leading the world on the greatest challenge facing our planet. To give working people a sense of hope, aspiration, and possibility once again. Thank you, conference. Thank you. I did media first. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to take some questions, and I'm going to start with the media. So I'm hoping we've got Alex Forsyth from the BBC here with us. Alex.
Hello, Sir Keir. Thank you. Alex Forsyth, BBC News. You talk about the need for businesses to invest in skills and training in the UK workforce, but that will take time. And you would have heard from business leaders here about crippling labour shortages now that are hampering growth. So how far would your pragmatic approach go in terms of increasing immigration in the short term? And how much is your stance on this driven by political considerations as much as economic ones?
Well, Alex, just let me take the final part of that question first, because I am utterly frustrated at the short-term fixes. What we've had for the last 12 years is the repetition of the same argument, whether it's on energy, whether it's on skill shortages, which is, what are you going to do in the here and now? Don't address the mid-term and the long term. And we keep going round and round this circle. The crisis is now sticking plaster, never the medium and the long term. And that is holding us back. So I believe profoundly in the argument I'm making about skills here. I remember back in 2015, when I first came into politics, I was the shadow immigration secretary. I'm a glutton for punishment. But talking to many people in this room, we had a discussion about skills, and it's not dissimilar to the discussion we're having today. So if we always see this as a short-term fix, I will be pragmatic, of course I do. I don't want a repeat of what we saw last year with HGV drivers. I get that. As I say, that's anti-growth and anti-business. But we have to address the medium and the long term. And it's a feature of the last 12 years that we haven't got to grips with the medium and the long term. And that will hold us back. And that's why, of course, we'll be pragmatic. Of course, we understand that we need to act now so that we help business and drive growth. But we have to address and run towards the challenge that is skills, run towards the challenge that is ensuring we have everybody back in the workforce, because there are hundreds of thousands of people who aren't working now who were working just a few years ago. And so this is, for me, an economic argument, not a question of political tactics. Thank you, Alex. I think we have Aubrey from The Guardian.
Hello, Sir Keir. You alluded in your speech to the importance that you want to place on economic stability. Can you be a bit more frank with the public and business leaders in this room about the sorts of policies that you think you won't be able to implement as quickly as you would like if Labour wins the next general election?
Well, Aubrey, I'm not going to draft the next Labour manifesto here on stage, but what I am saying this, and it's a very important point for me to make to this audience, which is we will inherit an economy that's been damaged by the last 12 weeks and the last 12 years, and we need to fundamentally accept that as an incoming government. Restoring stability is key. There's a cost to instability, and we've been paying that cost over the last few weeks and over the last few years. That means restoring faith in our institution. It means clear fiscal rules. We've set out that we'll pay for day-to-day, that we want debt down as a percentage of our economy. But, you know, that stability has to be our first priority. If that means that there are things which, good Labour things, I say, which we can't do as quickly as we would like, then that is a consequence of that security. But I will not give up on growth. That's why I've said what I've said about the investment that we need, the approach we need to skills, and getting people back into the workforce and innovation. But do we need to restore faith, restore stability? Aubrey, yes, we do. Do I accept that as an incoming government, it's not good enough for me to simply say, well, they made the mess. We don't have to be responsible about clearing it up. We are going to have to be responsible about clearing it up. Clear fiscal rules. Do I accept that that means that there are good Labour things that, as an incoming government, we won't be able to do as quickly as we'd like? Yes, I do accept that. I'm not going to spell it out now, but that's the conversation we want to have over the coming months as we go into that general election. Thank you, Aubrey. Lizzie, I think, from Bloomberg.
Thanks, Sir Keir. The economy is being significantly held back by this shortage of workers. What makes you think that you can fix that with the domestic labour force when governments historically and everywhere have consistently failed to do so? Thank you.
Well, Lizzie, I'm not going to just give up on this. To simply say that because we've not failed to address these issues in the last 12 years, we shouldn't try now is the wrong approach as far as I'm concerned. If you take just one example, the NHS. My wife works in the NHS, so I know it pretty well. We discuss it a lot. Amongst the pressures in the NHS is the basic lack of staff. We don't have enough people in the NHS. And again, there are two approaches. One is to say, well, let's have a sticking plaster then, deal with it in the short term. The other is to say, no, let's address the medium and the long term. And that's why we've put in place a plan to train up 15,000 doctors, more nurses, more midwives coming into the NHS. Because the message we need to send to the NHS is the cavalry is coming. We understand the problem. And we've been held back by the fact that we haven't trained enough doctors coming into the NHS. So, you know, the mere fact that in the last 12 years this hasn't been gripped is not a good enough reason for me not to grip it. There's the example in skills. I've had the same discussion on skills with people in this room for 7 years. We can't just say, well, it's impossible to do anything about it. I do think we can change the way we address skills, and we have to address it. And it will be a feature of an incoming Labour government that we will think strategically and in the long term. That's what I mean by partnership. A government being clear about what we need to achieve, the time frame in which we will want to achieve it, and how we work in partnership with business to achieve it. But I'm certainly, Lizzie, not going to give up on any of this on the basis that this government's failed to do it. That's why we need the change. That's why we need a general election. Graham from the Mirror, please.
Good morning. Graham Hiscott from Daily Mirror. Energy is one of the big concerns for some, if not many people in this room. What would Labour do to help those companies? And given the wider energy crisis, what would the party do to help businesses and households? That doesn't mean yet higher government borrowing or the need for deeper spending cuts.
Again, every question, this is good, every question is highlighting this problem of short-term fixes versus long-term solutions. Now, we need something that answers the question, how can you pay your bills this winter? We get that. That's why we led, best part of a year ago now, on the idea of ensuring that we use some of those oil and gas profits, the profits they didn't expect to make, and put it towards our energy costs. But that's not a longer-term or mid-term answer. We need to run towards renewables, we need an independent source of energy of our own, and we need to, frankly, knock out some of the obstacles in the way. If you take onshore wind farms, this government is still blocking onshore wind farms, probably the cheapest form of renewable energy we could have. And if we're going to go down that road, I'll be clear with you, lots of businesses have said to me, it's planning and regulation like that that's holding us up. You know, I've had frank conversations with CEOs who say we could build a wind farm in under 2 years, but it takes 7 years by the time you add in the planning and the regulation. We've got, the role of government is to knock some of that out of the way. And so we need a longer-term solution to this, whether it's wind farms or anything else, but running towards renewable energy. There are so many opportunities for us, but we need to do it running towards that challenge. I'll give you another example that I find deeply, deeply frustrating. 19 million homes in this country are leaking their energy because they're too drafty. So it's costing a fortune to heat a house, which is then losing the heat because the house is drafty. 10 years ago, we set about doing something about that. That's all dropped off in the last few years. I said over a year ago we should have a national mission to retrofit our houses to make sure they're better insulated, and nothing's been done about it. If we'd done something about it, 2 million houses now would be better insulated, 2 million families would be paying less bills. We've got to start thinking about the medium and the long term and working together in a partnership to achieve that, because otherwise we'll be doing what we've done for the last 12 years, which is sticking plaster, never address the real problem. And that is what leads in the end to stagnation. The single biggest problem of the last 12 years is our problem on growth. Thank you very much. And I think we've got Dan from the FT.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I ask you to be clear, first of all, that you think immigration levels currently are too high and that your policies will reduce in a net reduction in immigration or simply lead to different sorts of immigration? And secondly, can I ask, after a weekend of reading about Swiss-style trade deals, what a Labour Brexit deal with the EU looks like?
Thank you, Dan. I mean, on the question of numbers, I always start with what is driving the numbers when we discuss immigration. And if what's driving the numbers is our skills failure, or one of the big drivers is skills failure, then I think we need to address the skills issue, rather than just talking about arbitrary numbers, which is why I've set out the argument I have in the way I've made my speech this morning. And that does mean, if we get this right, that immigration will go down in some of those areas that are overly reliant on immigration. But equally, I'm not going to hold businesses back if there's innovation, technologies where we do need talent from abroad. But where we've been over-reliant and where we've been over-reliant because we've failed on skills, I want to address that by fixing the skills issue. I want to address the issue we've got with hundreds of thousands of people out of the labour market now when they were in it only a few years ago. That, as I say, takes us into the question of what are we doing about the NHS and mental health, which is holding many people back. So that's the way in which I see it. On the Swiss model, look, I've said on a number of occasions that we are not going back to the EU, and that means not going back into the single market or the customs union. But we have to make Brexit work. The deal this government has got us is not working well. It's holding business back, it's holding growth back. And there are things that we need to do to address it. Some of them we could start straight away. The protocol in Northern Ireland needs a pragmatic answer. And I think, I've talked to businesses in Northern Ireland, they have pragmatic approaches to how we could deal with the protocol in Northern Ireland. We need to reduce trade barriers by being clear that we want high standards. There isn't a conflict there. There's something we can build on. We need to share more when it comes to education and research, and scientific research in particular. I think there's much more we can do in the security space. If you look particularly at the response to the Ukraine crisis and the way NATO and the EU have worked together. So I do think that we can have a better Brexit. I think that we have to make Brexit work. And I think what's happened so far has been a government that simply said the words, get Brexit done, and put in place a deal which I think most people in this room would say is not working well for business, is not working well for exports, is not working well for growth. And I want to fight the next election on growth. I want to fight the next election on the economy. And I want an incoming Labour government to have the economy and growth of the economy as the absolute focus for what we want to deliver on in a 5-year Labour government. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Brian.
We've got time for about 3 questions from the audience, but I think I would exercise Chair's privilege by asking one ahead of that. If you get the keys of Downing Street tomorrow, what will be top of your list for driving growth?
Our Clean Power 2030, which is setting out a plan for what we want to achieve, and the plan and how we do it go together. I really need to stress this to this audience. Yes, an incoming government sets the goal. That is legitimate in a democracy. You win the right to set the missions. We should be talking to you about what the missions are before we get there, by the way, so that you think they're achievable. But then what we have is a partnership arrangement. On the reason I'm using the partnership example so much now is I want to build that relationship, that partnership way of working, so that if and when we come into government, we can do it from day one. on that first day, hopefully in Downing Street, so that we're saying to you, how do we deliver this together? What do you need us to do as a government? What levers does the government pull? What does business do in this? There are different models. An incoming government can say, we'll suck it all up to the government, nationalise everything. We're not going to do that. An incoming government can say, well, we set the mission, but the market knows best, so we'll just back off. Not going to do that. A true partnership where we work together to achieve the missions of the next Labour government.
Great, thank you. Okay, first question. Is Emma here? Emma, just if you say who you are, who your company is, and then the brief question. Thank you.
Thank you very much
Hi, Emma.
for being here. My question really will allude probably to the CBI theme, go for growth. And really, what I would like to ask, if you become a prime minister, what would be the first thing you would like to change to make this country more competitive? And what would be your expectation from business to support you in your objectives?
Emma, it's a version of what I've just said to Brian, which is setting out our mission for growth, how we're going. Firstly, one, we want growth. I think that's really, because I obviously want better public services, but the two go together. So growth has to be the single focus. Have to be clear about what we mean by growth. And this is what I said in the speech. There are different models of growth. You can say we want to grow, and one way to do it is to grow London and the South East very, very quickly, even more. London and the South East provides a lot already, and then use that to redistribute across the rest of the country. I don't want that model of growth. I think one of the things that held us back is that we're not using all the places, all the talent across the whole of the country. So it's a plan for growth, an absolutely clear understanding, Emma, about what we mean by growth, because I want to see growth in every place across the whole of the United Kingdom, and then a way of working with you and others to deliver on that. And the way of working is as important as the ambition, because the ambition will never be realised if we don't have that way of working. And it's very important that, therefore, I use every opportunity I get, that Rachel Reeves does, to discuss with you, before we go into government, what that growth plan looks like, because we'll have to hit the ground running. And it's why I've said to my shadow cabinet, and I should share this with this audience, that I don't see business engagement for my Labour Party as simply each member of the shadow cabinet thinking, oh, what are the businesses in my area? I better make sure I've had a cup of tea with them. It's a way of working. It's actually having a discussion about what we want to achieve and practicing a partnership so that when we get into government, we're not doing it for the first time, we're continuing a discussion that we've had all the way into it. So, Emma, that's really important to what I want to achieve, and very important for me to get across to this audience, many of whom I've spoken to about the way in which an incoming Labour government will work with you. And that's what I mean by being pro-business. Lots of people use the word pro-business, but it's about how you see business as a force for good, and then work with it as a government harnessed together.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Emma.
Is it Marcus over here?
Sorry, Arthur, is it?
Marcus.
Hi,
Marcus, I'm so sorry.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. My name's Marcus Watson, and I represent a company called Xlinks. I'm also an investor in that company. And I was delighted to hear that central to your plans is green growth. So Xlinks aims to help decarbonise the UK economy. And our first project is to harvest solar and wind from Morocco and pipe it to the UK to provide baseload electricity. And we plan to deliver 8% of the UK's electricity at baseload level. And so my question is, I would love to know what you will do additionally or differently to enable new entrants to the decarbonisation energy world to enter that market as speedily as possible and as effectively as possible.
Well, Marcus, I think amongst the things that we would do, and this is what we see GB Energy is absolutely crucial for, is using government or public investment as a catalyst to spark that innovation and support that innovation in the first place. As many people in this room will know, one of the things about starting a new area, starting a new business, starting a new sector, is the risk that that carries with it. And the role of government is to help with that risk, not to provide all of the money. When we talk about public investment, I'm not talking about the public sector putting all of the money in and taking all of the risk, but it is something where we can innovate and work with companies, businesses, sectors to get, to prove sometimes the concept and support and take away some of the risks that would otherwise inhibit. But Marcus, the other thing I should say, because I've said a lot about green growth and our ambition there, but that has to sit alongside the work we want to do with our other brilliant sectors, life sciences, AI, our creative industries, which, where we find 750,000 jobs, I think, across our economy, because we need to see growth everywhere in all sectors. But it will be that way of working, because I want private investment to come in alongside what we're going to put in, but I know that we're not going to be able to get that just by saying we want it or flicking a switch. It's about a way of working. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you. We've got time for one more. Over there? Yeah. Is it David?
I think it's me. Hi, it's Stuart Mason from Mutual Value. Thank you for such a clear vision this morning. Over here.
Got you.
Right at the back, in the cheap seats.
There are very bright lights here. I can't.
In the cheap seats. Thank you for such a clear narrative this morning, a clear vision, and the setting out your vision of partnership. Question I have is whether we can trust that, given some of its recent history, your party is behind you in this, and your way of working, and the trades unions, in the approach that you're taking.
Stuart, thank you for that question, because it gives me the opportunity to reinforce a very important point, which is the Labour Party has changed. We've turned the Labour Party inside out, and that's particularly significant when it comes to the way we're working with business. And I think anybody who's engaged with me or with Rachel Reeves or any of the shadow cabinet knows that and can see the different way of working. But we've also managed, and I said it in my speech, to unite the party behind me. Some of you will have been at our conference in Liverpool this year. There was a very different feel to that conference. Now, as Labour Party members and activists, we would say that, we want that to be the case. But I think, in fairness, almost everybody who attended that conference came away with the feeling that the Labour Party has changed. And it's very difficult for the opposition to get cut through, and it only happens, so it's a bit like the beam on a lighthouse. It only comes round onto the opposition once every so often. It came onto us in our conference, and that beam illuminated a Labour Party that had changed, a Labour Party that had the answers to the challenges that our country is facing, and a Labour Party that had the confidence to put those ideas into action. And therefore, Stuart, I say to you loud and clear, this Labour Party has changed. There is no going back, and it is united behind what we're trying to achieve. And you saw that at our party conference. And some of you will have been there, and I think will testify that it felt like a very, very different conference to some of the conferences we've had in recent years. It's the best conference we've had, frankly, since 1996. Thank you very much, Stuart.
Thank you very much, Keir.
Thank you. Thank you.